So picture this. You've got two ER travel nurses. They hold the exact same license, work the exact same specialty, and they're both putting in 36 hours a week, right? But one of them is grinding at a level 1 trauma center, pulling in about $3,800 a week. The other, they're at a community ED, and their pay is capped at around $2,000. That is a massive, literally an $1,800 weekly pay gap. Same license, wildly different bank accounts. Today, we're going to dig into the data, figure out exactly why this gap exists, and more importantly, show you how to land on the winning side of it.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the ER Travel Nurse Salary Guide for 2026. And look, going through this source material, it's super clear this isn't just some boring list of numbers. It's actually a financial masterclass on how to maximize your contract's value. If you've ever wondered what these contracts are truly worth behind closed doors, you are absolutely in the right place. So let's jump right in.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for today's Explainer. First, we'll cover that $1,800 weekly pay gap. Second, how trauma centers drive top pay. Third, California's Title 22 advantage. Fourth, high ROI certifications for ER. And finally, number 5, negotiation and timing strategies.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the $1,800 weekly pay gap, decoding the ER market.
Okay, so the national average weekly pay for an ER travel nurse currently sits at $2,148. But honestly, averages can be incredibly deceiving. The real range on standard contracts fluctuates wildly. We're talking anywhere from a low of $1,450 all the way up to $3,700 a week. And if you happen to step into a crisis contract, wow, you could be looking at $3,500 to well over $5,000 a week, which is just incredible. So what actually dictates where you land on that massive spectrum?
Well, I can tell you it's definitely not a lack of opportunity. There are over 16,000 active ER travel listings nationally right now. So demand is not holding you back. Instead, your pay depends almost entirely on 3 strategic levers: your facility type, your market, and your certifications. Let's look at how this builds into our first major strategy.
Moving right along to Section 2, trauma centers drive top pay, the facility lever.
If we look at the financial hierarchy of emergency medicine, right at the top, Level 1 trauma centers are paying $2,800 to over $3,800 every single week. Level 2 centers are right behind them, clocking in at $2,500 to $3,400. Then it drops down to standalone pediatric ERs. And finally, community or regional EDs at $2,000 to $2,700. The takeaway here is undeniable. Targeting Level 1 and 2 trauma centers is, without a doubt, the most direct, aggressive path to the very top of that pay range.
And, this perfectly illustrates why that premium exists in the first place. Level I centers aren't just paying more for the fun of it, right? They're paying a premium because they need nurses who can seamlessly integrate into a high-octane, incredibly intense environment. We're talking mass casualty events, penetrating trauma, complex multisystem injuries. Basically, higher acuity equals higher stress, which rightfully commands a significantly higher weekly payout.
Okay, Section 3, California's Title 22 advantage, market forces.
So markets like California, New York, and Massachusetts consistently top the pay charts. But California, it is truly unique, and that's because of a law called Title 22. This law legally mandates a strictly enforced 1-to-4 nurse-to-patient ratio for general ER patients, and that actually drops to 1-to-1 for trauma activations. That kind of protection, it's basically the holy grail for experienced ER nurses, and it pushes pay up to between $2,200 and $3,200 plus a week. But, and this is a pretty big but, you have to weigh that against the heavy financial realities on the ground. California hits you with a state tax of up to 13.3%, coastal housing will just aggressively eat up your stipends, and getting that non-compact license, yeah, that takes 2 to 4 months of pure bureaucracy. So it's a very high reward but high barrier market.
Let's transition into Section 4, high ROI certifications for ER, micro levers. $370. That is roughly the upfront cost of the Certified Emergency Nurse, or CEN exam. Now, I know for a lot of people, the idea of studying for and taking another exam just sounds exhausting. But if we look at the data and treat this as a financial investment, we really need to see what this relatively small cost actually yields.
Because the return on investment here is honestly staggering. The CEN is the single most valuable ER certification you can get. It typically adds $2 to $5 an hour to your base rate. So, on a standard 36-hour contract, that's an extra $72 to $180 more a week right in your pocket. Do the math on that. That $370 exam cost pays for itself within the very first month of your next contract. Plus, as a massive bonus, it vastly improves your odds of landing those ultra-high-paying Level 1 and 2 trauma placements we talked about earlier.
Now, beyond the CEN, there's some really essential supplementary certs you should know about. The TNCC, for example, is practically mandatory at trauma centers. But here's an amazing pro tip from the data. Do not pay for this yourself. Most agencies will actually reimburse the cost before your first qualifying assignment, which is incredibly helpful. Then you've got the TCRN, which further strengthens your leverage at those top-tier trauma centers. And of course, PALS or CPN are pretty much non-negotiable standard requirements if you're looking to tap into that lucrative pediatric ER market.
All right, bringing it home with Section 5, Negotiation and Timing Strategies, the Playbook.
First up, let's talk about quite possibly the easiest money you will ever make. Timing and shift differentials. Listen, if you just align your job search with high-demand windows, think flu season from December through March, or those massive summer PTO coverage gaps from June to August, rates just naturally spike. It's basic supply and demand. Combine that timing with a willingness to work nights, and you've hit a gold mine. ER night shifts typically add $5 to $10 an hour. That effortlessly tacks on an extra $180 to $360 a week, and honestly, often with slightly lower patient volume, even if the acuity remains super high.
Now for the actual negotiation playbook itself. It turns out agencies have way more rate flexibility than they let on. Step 1. Literally just ask directly for rate flexibility. You'd be amazed how often that alone actually works. Step 2, and this is crucial, present a documented competing offer from a second agency. According to the research, this is your absolute strongest point of leverage. Nurses regularly report gaining an extra $150 to $350 a week simply by presenting a competing offer. And Step 3, never ever accept a headline number at face value. Always demand a full, itemized breakdown.
And here is exactly what you're looking for in that breakdown: your taxable rate, your housing stipend, your meals and incidentals, and your exact overtime calculation. Listen closely here because this is where they get you. Two contracts with the exact same headline total can carry drastically different real-world values depending on how this split is structured. And a huge warning here. None of those stipends are tax-free unless you maintain a valid tax home. If you mess up your tax compliance, that lucrative contract suddenly becomes a massive financial headache with the IRS.
Now just a quick reality check before we close things out today. This level of pay, it's elite, and it requires an elite foundation. As the data notes, new grads generally cannot break into ER travel work. Most agencies require a strict minimum of 1 to 2 years of recent bedside ER experience. Why? Because travelers are expected to triage and safely manage critical patients totally independently from day one. You're being paid a premium to be the plug-and-play solution, definitely not a trainee.
But if you do have that experience, you now have the exact blueprint to maximize your worth. You know the levers, right? Target those trauma centers, get your CN certification, perfectly time your search around those high-demand windows, and never go to the negotiating table without a competing offer in hand. The tools are right in front of you, the data is clear, so I'll leave you with this. Are you ready to finally decode your contract and claim your true market value? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.